Welcome to the Grief and Belief podcast, where we share stories of hope. Thank you for joining us. We hope this powerful story will help you feel God's love for you today.
Welcome to another episode of the Grief and Belief podcast. I'm David Mickelson.
And I'm Kori Andrews.
And we are excited to come to you. We're anticipating that this episode will come out the week of Christmas with all of the exciting possibilities that Christmas brings, but also lots of heavy emotion for people who are, going through a grief experience. And Kori, do you have any thoughts or ideas related to Christmas that you wanted to share with everybody?
Yeah, maybe just a thought real quick is I've thought about how there's 3 times in the New Testament where something's wrapped. And the first time is when baby Jesus comes and he's wrapped in swaddling clothes, and then the next time is when he dies and he's wrapped again. But the third time that he's wrapped is that something's mentioned that's wrapped. It's actually nothing. It's the napkin. It was wrapped. And that signified to John and Peter when they're in the tomb that he was risen, right? And that it wasn't robbers or whatever that had taken his body. But I think it's significant that it was an empty wrapping that signified something great had happened. And I think, we talk Merry Christmas. Maybe sometimes it feels like an empty Christmas when you're missing someone. But because that wrapping was empty, what was wrapped that day, there was no gift in it. The greatest gift is possible. And just maybe a little Christmas reminder that Jesus came so that we can have our loved ones again.
I love that, Kori. That's really awesome. In fact, the reason why we're visiting with our guest today is because of a gift that was given to us when one of our previous guests came to be interviewed in person. Addie Billman, she brought a book and gave it to Kori and I. And the book was written by our very own Jordan Robertson, who we're interviewing today. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Jordan and see if she will be on our podcast. And lo and behold, we have Jordan here with us. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us on the Grief and Belief podcast.
Yeah, thank you for this invitation.
Jordan's been so fun to get to know and to visit with and to learn about her experience. Jordan's husband, Jake Robertson, passed away almost 10 years ago from cancer. And Jordan's going to share a little bit about her experience with him and with grief and some of what she's learned as she has become a counselor and just through all the experience and education that she has. And so we're excited to learn today.
And I just want to give maybe a heads up to our audience. Earlier today, Jordan, I didn't tell you this, but I just in preparation for this, I stumbled upon your blog, and I ended up on the day that your husband passed away, and I was just sitting in my office, just tears streaming down my face. I just felt that, and your writing was so powerful, and that book has been such a gift to my family, and just those little moments that I've already had has me really excited for our audience to be able to hear from you. And so again, thank you for being on. And would you mind kind of introducing yourself to our audience, telling them a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. I am a girl from Orem, Utah, and I live in Provo, Utah. But in the middle of that, I had some other experiences. So I served a mission in Venezuela. That was really seminal to my life and growing and experiences. I graduated from BYU. I actually met Jake doing Washington seminar. So we were in DC September 11th. That was the semester we were there when all of that was. It didn't work out to date right then, but after my mission, he somehow was still available. I always tell him he waited for me. He hated hearing that. So can't really say anything about it now. But then we got married 2004 and moved to Salt Lake, where he, much to his chagrin, attended law school at the University of Utah because in his heart he bleeds blue, and we are Cougar fans through and through. but he had a great experience at the U Law School. And I pursued a master's in public administration there. We had our first daughter, and then, as two kids from Orem would do, we moved to Phoenix, Arizona. So our parents were like, great, this grandkid, our kids, they're both from our hometown, because we're both from Orem. And no, we moved 12 hours away to the hot desert. So we lived there for almost 10 years. Jake worked at a law firm doing commercial litigation, and I stayed at home having more kids. So we had our first daughter. Her name is Lauren. She's 20 on a mission in Winnipeg, Canada. Our second daughter is Ellie. She's 18, a senior, almost 18 next week, senior in high school. Ada, 16, sophomore in high school. And then 4 years later, we had our only boy, Thomas, and he is just turned 12 in the 6th grade. So yeah, so those are our kids, and that's where we lived in Phoenix until Jake passed away. After he died, then it became really obvious that as a mom of 4 kids, 10 and under, I probably wasn't going to hack life alone, even though we had the most incredible support from our ward, friends, family. But it just was clear that we needed to move. So my kids and I actually came back to Utah and landed in Provo and have been here ever since. So my parents, Jake's parents, are still here, really close. And then we had the fortune of having my sister and then 3 of his brothers also moved to Utah over the last decade. So now we just have so much of our family here around us, and it's such a happy thing.
Well, I love that it's Christmas red that you're wearing today, not to be confused with another type of red.
That's right.
But on that note, could you tell us a little bit about your education and kind of where you're at there?
Yeah, so I did an MPA, and then after Jake died, I got really involved in volunteering with hospice, and it became clear I don't care about government work. I don't want to do it. That's not where my heart is. And so I wanted to pivot to a path where I could really be helpful to people. And so I decided to pursue counseling. And since I already had a master's degree, I'm vain enough to be like, well, I should get a PhD. So I'm in a PhD program at BYU called Counseling Psychology to become a psychologist. I'm working through April 2027 is my graduation date. So yeah, It's been a great experience.
Right around the corner. You're almost there.
Yeah.
Well, introduce us to Jake Robertson, this handsome guy. We've got his picture up for those on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's the best. So Jake knew what he wanted to be from when he was little. And I think that was one of the gifts that God gave him, knowing his life would be shorter. Like he just knew from kind of teenagehood, like, I want to be an attorney. And he loved being an attorney. He loved the research side, especially, like give him the most complicated case and he loved to dig out and could find and produce every fact and figure and data that was needed. So that was a really cool thing, to be married to someone who didn't just work because like, oh, I need to, we've got to survive, but like really loved this thing that he was doing. I think likewise, he also really loved the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like being a missionary, being a participating member of the church that's just who he was and what he did. And I think then overarching, or in addition to both of those things, was just his love for being a dad. He loved our girls so much. He was the perfect girl dad. He was so steady and even. I tend to be more like volatile. I got a lot of energy. I go up, I go down, but he was just so steady, and such a warm and loving presence. So those are kind of some of his things. He had other peculiarities in that Cougar obsessed, right? All free time was spent watching, going to, following BYU football, basketball. And that was a really fun thing because it became something we did with our family, me and him family, but then us with his siblings' parents, us with my siblings' parents. It just BYU sports were a really fun thing.
I imagined he played some sports or was an
Yeah.
active, kind of kid.
I think he wanted to play more than he did, but he loved sports and he was really athletic and had opportunities in basketball, in lacrosse, in tennis. And from when the second we had a child, he wanted to buy her sports equipment. So my 3-year-old had golf clubs and a basketball and a mitt and a football and cleats and that was kind of high priority. Like our kids will have good sports stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so funny because just reminds me of our family. We've got 3 daughters and 1 son, and I loved playing sports growing up, and that's what it's fun to do as a family. We're going to volleyball games tonight, and so a good family experience together.
Yeah.
Tell us how help us understand Jake getting sick and how cancer came upon him and what that experience was like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate being able to talk about it. I think sometimes when you're down the grief road a decade, it's something that happened and most people know, but you don't really get to revisit it verbally. So I just feel like that's a helpful thing to remember, that revisiting it, even if it's been years later, is a gift.
Yeah.
So his onset was sudden and unexpected and shocking. It was January of 2014. We had our son in November of 2013. So he was 2 months old. We had a little baby, and then our girls at the time they'll turn ages at the new year. They were 4, 6, and almost 8. And it was just a January date. Jake had been really busy with work. He had a case moving to trial. So he was putting in, 60, 70 hour work weeks. Hadn't been sleeping well. We had a newborn, right? It was January, cold season, you anticipate. So he called me from work on January 24th and said, "I'm not feeling well. I don't think I should drive home. Can you come get me?" This was probably at 2:30. And I was like, what? I had our daughter finished school at 3. I had the baby. He was taking a nap. So I was like, okay, how bad is it? And I'm a minimizer of physical things. I'm like, you're fine. You're fine. So I was like, okay, I'll come, but it's going to be an hour before I can get there. So I go get him. We come home and he's just not feeling well. And he started having kind of weakness on his right side and felt like his hand was going numb and not well, to the point of like never having felt this way before. It was scaring him. So after Googling, this was pre-chat GPT, but kind of Googling his symptoms, he's like, "Jordan, I think I might be having a stroke." And I was like, oh my gosh. So he drove himself to the urgent care. And I go in and I'm again with the kids trying to keep things. And he calls from the urgent care and says like, "Yeah, they did a stroke test. I'm definitely weaker on the one side. They want me to go to the emergency room." And this is going to reflect horribly on me, but it's January 24th. We just paid our deductibles from the last medical year.
Yep. Where you had a baby.
Take me in an ambulance. And I was
Oh
like,
no.
we're not doing it. I will come and get you." Because I didn't want to pay for it. So horrible.
But understandable. But
Yep.
Because again, I'm thinking, you're probably fine. Like you're under duress. Things have been going, like there
and he's
was
30
for it to be,
he's probably 36 or 30.
Yeah, he had just turned 30. Well, he was turning 35. Yeah.
Turning 35. So I mean, major things don't happen to 35-year-old active, dads.
No. Yeah. So my lovely neighbor, I call her, "Can you come over and be with our kids?" Get him. We go to the emergency room. They admit him. They start the process of testing. And And in that, it was kind of a back and forth. I had a nursing baby and had nothing prepared for him. And so it was, I couldn't always be there. So I kind of was at the hospital, and then he's, sitting, and then I went home, and then I came back, and then I went home. And it was only, the hospital was 10 minutes away. So it wasn't that complicated. But through that process, it's now probably 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock that night. And he says, just to be sure, the doctors come in, because now his symptoms had abated and he felt pretty fine. He said, just to be sure, the doctor who's come in wants to run an MRI. And I'm like, okay, let's do it, So they do the MRI, and I had gone home and was with our son, and he called me and said, Jord, they found an abnormality in the scan, and there's something in my brain. And I was like, what? Like, what is that? What does that even mean? So I was able to go back to the hospital. And at that point, they'd assigned, a higher level of care, and someone from neurology came to us. And this is now 1:30 in the morning, and told us, there's a spread of options that this could be. It could be something like MS, that it could be, that's kind of a lifetime degenerative disease, or it could be up to a brain tumor. And this poor person is telling us this as we're moving from the elevator from emergency room to inpatient. And I am pressing them of like, what does this mean? What does this mean? Because you're just shocked by it all. And so this poor technician, or whoever it was, I don't even know, gets to the point of telling me, if it's the bad thing, he's dead in a year. Like that's where we left it. So then we get him in the room and we get him settled, and I have to leave again because I have to go back to this baby. We weren't in a position where I could bring him, and I didn't know. And so I just remember, having this, like, it could be a thing he lives with, or it could be like this terminal brain cancer that kills you instantly. And I remember walking with a nurse accompanying me to the elevator so I could go down and go home. And I went out to our minivan and got in the car, and I just had this, like, I just started screaming because I was like, how can this even be possible? Like, he had called me not even 12 hours before saying, I think I'm sick, I need to come home. I'm thinking, how cold too. He could die in a year. And that's how it started. We went, met with some doctors. The neurologists they thought they'd do a biopsy the next day. They couldn't. So that was postponed for 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, we're meeting with people and grappling, reading. And of course, as Jake's the researcher, he's digging deep to be like, what is going on? And, trying to keep up hope, like, oh, maybe it's not the worst thing. But at the biopsy, then that confirmed that, yeah, it's not just cancer, it's glioblastoma multiforme, which is a terminal brain cancer with a life expectancy of 14 months. Average.
So you had to wait 2 weeks to even confirm that it was cancer. And was he in the hospital?
No.
That whole time? He came home?
They let him come home, but they told him, don't go to work, don't do anything until we sort this out. So we were all just sitting there.
So what were those 2 weeks? I mean, again, he's researching, but like, talk a little bit more about the 2 weeks time.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, it's heaven and hell, it's like, we're there. I had been longing for like him he took a little paternity leave when we had our son, but then his workload was such that, so it was like, here he is. He's just home. He's here. My parents had come down, his parents had come down. So my, people were there helping us. It was like, wow, this is amazing. I've never had so much help with a newborn, but then it's hellish because you just can't help but construe every possibility
Mhm.
in your mind.
Yeah. You've got that pit in your stomach that
Mhm.
says that life is about to change
Yeah.
pretty
And trying to live
drastically.
normally, and your kid's like, "Yeah, this is normal. Everyone's here. Dad's home," They're like,
Yeah.
"What? What's
Yeah.
going on?"
Right.
Uh,
And through his research, did he kinda think that that was gonna be the diagnosis? Did you
he
guys
was
kinda
really hopeful. I mean, he
Yeah.
definitely had laid that out, but he really was like, "There are many things that this could be," and
Mhm.
because of the way it presented, we saw the scans, it was a just one tiny little they said it was like the size of your fingernail. That's all
Mm.
that was showing up in imaging. But the trick with glioblastoma is it quadruples every 2 weeks. So when they did the biopsy, it went from the size of a fingernail to the size of a little acorn. So it
Oh,
just
wow.
grows like
Mm,
exponentially fast. And
which
most
is
people
why
don't
it's
find it at onset. Most people, it's a baseball before they even have symptoms or go in.
yeah. And because it's so fast growing, there's not enough they can do to get control of it. And that's why it's terminal, I'm guessing.
Yes, and because of the nature of the disease, it lives in glial cells, which are like jello. They're diffuse, and so it's not a tumor like in an arm or in a body part that can be removed and then it's not touching anything else. It's kind of part of everything.
Mm,
So
okay.
even if you take it out, it's not actually out
Mhm.
because the cells are diffusing in areas that you just can't see yet.
Yeah.
So
It's
what Yeah. So what was the treatment plan after they told you, "Okay, this is the diagnosis, now what?"
Yeah, so that's where probably one of the first I think in these experiences, you have, like, these, like, miracle things that occur, and this is one of the first of them. Is with that hospital system that we were at, they said, because of where this tumor is located, the neurosurgeon said, "I can't operate on it because it's in too delicate of an area. If I operate, you may not be the same person when you wake up." So all we can offer you is radiation and chemotherapy, which Jake had read, the life expectancy of that is like 3 or 4 months. So you're just like, "What?" But we had a really close friend who had reached out, to me, offering help, but you don't know what you need, but I just one day was rocking Tommy, and I really had this really strong impression of like, you need to get him in at this other hospital system. And so this friend had told me, I'm connected with this other neurosurgeon. And so I just picked up my phone and called her and said, I have to talk to that doctor. And this was on a Saturday morning. Monday at 10 o'clock, we were in to the office. Like how does that even
Yeah, wow.
she just through her network was able to talk to him and gave me the personal number to his secretary who said, "You come in right now at this point." And that doctor, it was like the distinction, the one doctor versus the other, it was like the distinction of like darkest night to like brightest day. We walk into him and he says, "Oh yes, I've operated on tumors, many in this area. You will be fine. We will be able to do this, that, or the other. We have this clinical trial we're running. You can participate. Da, da, da." So it just gave us this like hope of maybe rather than months, there can be a little more time, which extended really mercifully in Jake's behalf for over 2 years. And I know hearing that, it's like, what? 2 years? That's nothing. But knowing what you're up against with this disease, it was everything.
Well, and you would take one more day,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
get like
Mhm.
we'll take whatever we could get.
Totally.
So for being worried about 3 to 4 months to 2 years sounds like a miracle,
Yeah.
exactly like you're saying it. So what did you do during that time as you knew that it was terminal, but he's probably not feeling great all of the time?
Yeah.
What were those 2 years like?
Yeah. They were wonderful and excruciating. Again, it's like these you live in this polarity. he worked the first year, and that was really a gift because he was able to kind of end on his terms. The cases he worked on were so involved that like they went for 8 to 10 years at a time, and he just was so invested on some things. He's like, Jordan, there's things on these cases that only I know. And so he was able to really hand stuff off, share information, be involved in meetings, just leave in a way that I don't know, he still carried his dignity in what he had tried to do professionally. I think as a family, we felt two things. First, we felt like we have to just live our normal life. There are a lot of options that people present to you, like you can go here and do this and try that and whatever. But we just really, and he felt very strongly like, I'm not going to spend what time I have chasing a cure. And so in some ways, we just like lived our life. We went to our kids' school things. We had play dates at the park. We had movie nights, we swam in the pool. We just did the things that were really grounding and normalizing. But then we also had opportunities to do extra things, right? Like I can't even explain the generosity and goodness of people, but like opportunities to go on trips, to have experiences. We went to Disneyland, we went to Hawaii, we went to cabins in the woods, we sat on the floor of a Suns game, we rented a limo and drove our kids all around town because that was our second daughter just wanted to ride in a limo. So you also did these things, to kind of provide relief and to make memories. So it was both. It was that like keeping our life routine, but then having wonderful experiences.
Was there ever any guilt for not chasing a cure from him or for you on your end? Did you ever feel any guilt or heaviness there that you weren't fighting more or doing more or thinking, did those things of like, what if we had done this? Does that ever weigh on you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really doesn't. That was something it's right away when the doctor said he'd operate. Jake had the option of participating in the clinical trial, which meant like pursuing an alternate form of radiation or pursuing the normal radiation course. And that was like this, it was our first, like, you got to choose one or the other. And the outcomes would be maybe vastly different. And so, so it really felt like, we need to decide on this. And I really felt like it's interesting because you're married and you're one, but it's like, it's also this thing he is experiencing that's happening in his body. And I'm not part of that, So, so he really felt encouraged to do the clinical trial. And for me, I was vacillating, but that morning I woke up and you're just searching and praying like, God, please help me know. But I read the scripture in Matthew 25 and it was the verse of like, you cannot serve God and mammon. And the idea of it to me, what hit to me was like, once you make a choice, that's where you go. And that's where you stand. And there is no looking back on what could have been or what might have been. And I think having that happen at that immediate early juncture then just proved the path forward for me. Yeah. And so it hasn't been something that I felt weighed down by.
Thank you for that perspective. I think that's so helpful.
Yeah.
So take us now to kind of the end of the road. And this is hard because we've just in the last few minutes, we've come to love Jacob, and Jake, and it's hard to say goodbye even in moments like this. But yeah, take us to that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that's coming to mind is just like what like it was such a sacred thing to see him submit. And submission, you feel like, why use that word? Because it's like the cancer is taken over, you have no choice. But for him, it was really distinct. Like he never um, resisted what was ultimately going to happen. He just submitted to it. And the only experience I have is like the only person I've read in the scriptures is who does that is like Jesus, that he just hates it. He doesn't like it. It's not fun. Like none of those things. Jake didn't want this. He fought with every part of his being, but when it became like this is the reality, he just was willing to submit to it. And I think that really afforded all of us a lot of peace, as we gathered with his siblings and parents, with my siblings and parents, talked, met with friends and his coworkers and just all the people we love over those months. It was just like a really peaceful time where everyone could just share things with him and have that time to interact with him where he could impart his love for everybody. But it was just a real feeling of submission rather than like resignation or anger or cynicism. It was really sacred. So
Did he prepare for that day as it maybe relates to your kids? Did he make videos, write letters, or what?
yeah,
Just
I
trying to
know.
think of what that last little bit would be like.
Well, yes, because you see all the movies of like when a parent dies, that's what they're supposed to
Yeah,
do. And the kids get these. So poor Jake, from when we first found out the reality of his diagnosis, I was very like, you have to do this, like you have to. And it was probably self-preservation because it's like, it's just going to be me with these kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need them
Yeah.
to know what you think and what and so he was willing, he knew something I really wanted, but I will say that was really hard. It's hard to think about writing letters or recording videos for children you will never see grow up.
Mm.
That's hard. And I think now, yeah, I can see more like, of what that asked of him. So yes, there was times before surgery, he wrote us all a letter and he did a series of video recordings, at different junctures throughout his illness, but one especially about 6 months before he passed away, and was willing, wrote up a whole summary of bullet points of his life and just things that were important to him. He and I, in the early stages, because I mostly was losing my mind. We got the recommendation. I was going to therapy from our therapist to make what's called a death plan, where it was just a place we could put all the things we were so worried about. And so that involved, writing out things like where his feelings about what's important for our kids, his feelings about raising teenagers, his feelings about young adults, what he would want, what he, but he was also really hesitant on that. He's like, because the dead people become saints. And I don't want what I say to be prescriptive because I don't know what our kids' situations will look like. And so it's again, I'm like, is that my theme? It's like,
Yeah.
you're juxtaposing these things. So yes, he was willing. And I think I feel grateful. My kids feel grateful for everything that he left, but it was really hard to do, and harder, I think, than I really even knew at the time.
Yeah, what a balance, right? And I so wise for him to recognize that I don't want this all to become prescriptive or, or you to feel bad because you didn't live up to, something I said I expected once in a video or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's super wise. And when I stumbled upon, I mentioned I stumbled upon your blog. I read about that last day and I think the part that got me, where I start crying in my office, which we do a lot of these stories, and usually I hold it together,
Mm.
but there was just a moment there where it was at the very end, and you could tell he didn't want to leave,
Yeah.
and I just think it just hit my dad heart,
Mm.
to think of saying goodbye, and your spirit being willing and knowing what, God's will and things like that, but just your flesh and your desires of just being with your family and oof. it just that just hit me. And so I don't know if you want to talk at all about kind of that last day, or some of your thoughts or feelings related to that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the feeling, like, he had an experience, they were offering one more surgery, and he didn't wanna do it. Like, it was just like, "I don't wanna do this anymore," but our daughters, we'd been telling them, and one of them said, like, "But daddy, if you don't do surgery, then you won't be here with me." And so he was like, "I'll do it," and I think
Yeah.
that was it. Like, who wants to leave their kids? But, dads and girls, there's some special thing there. I have only one son, but I'm like, mom and son, there's a special thing there.
Yeah.
But he just didn't want to leave, I think. And you're at that point where, like, you're just barely getting to know these little kids and getting an understanding of who they are. So yeah, so that dying day, he had been agitated days before, um, and fevered and all of the things I think that happen as your systems are shutting down. But the day before, then he just entered into a pretty kind of tranquil state, and was there, um, for that next day. In my mind, I had envisioned, like, we're all going to be gathered around. It will be, but when he starts breathing the death rattle, it's like, no, probably I don't want my kids to see this. So,
Yeah.
so the morning he passed away, he had been breathing that way probably since 3 in the morning, but, his parents were there. They had moved and were renting a short-term apartment just like a block away from our house, and they had come over, and I said, "He's been breathing this way for a while." And so his dad, said, "I'll stay with you." And then his mom said, "Let me take the kids." So they went actually to my daughter had a soccer game that morning, and so, they were there, and his dad was with me as he passed away. And then, they came back, not half an hour later, and I think that was a really special thing. I really had the feeling to, like, keep the lights low. We had the blinds closed, it was still dark, so when they came in, he was still warm, and you couldn't tell, and they just, did different things. One daughter, went and was just laying on him and crying and kissed him. One daughter pulled down the blanket and just, like, needed to visually see, like, what is happening, My one daughter, I had her just put her hand on his heart so she'd know, like, when you die, your heart's not beating. So these things, because 'cause you're trying to make this reality conveyable in a way that they can understand, because they're so little. And I think one of the saddest things was, like, the day or 2 after he died, we had a hospital bed for 2 weeks in our room, and my son came in, and he's, like, 2 and a half, he's just learning to talk, but he looks at me, and he looks around the room, and he just says, "Where'd daddy go?" And I was like, "Uh." So you're trying to help even a little toddler understand what happened and what that means.
Such big concepts for such little ones to really wrap their head around, and uh, that's uh that's so hard, Jordan. Um,
Uh,
but thank you for being willing to go back to those hard places and to share these beautiful experiences. Tell us, I'm thinking of young widow, young kids. Tell us about kind of the grief that ensued after Jake's passing.
mm,
What was particularly hard? What did, I don't know, what was it for you that was really difficult?
yeah. Yeah, I think, before someone dies, there's a term for it I've since learned, but it's, like, called anticipatory grief. So that's, like, this grief you have for this thing that you know is gonna happen that you dread and don't want to happen, right? But then once the person dies, you move into bereavement, which is a specific type of grief for the loss of someone who's died. And I think for me, it came kind of twofold in that, I'm grieving the realities of Jake being dead, but then what also happened is that we moved very shortly after he died. So we had anticipated moving with him. That was the hope. That was the plan. Everything was orchestrated for him to switch care, to move, from one state to another because he had gone on long-term disability and we didn't need to be in Arizona anymore. And so everything had been set up in place to the we had a house, we had a contract, and so but mercifully that was all established because I don't think I could have done any of that or made that type of decision. But so we moved. He died in April. I moved in July, and about October, it was like I just went into probably the darkest time of my life I've ever known, because it was this. I think when you're doing things and in the throes of taking care of stuff, you can't feel it. But it was like we had moved. Everyone had come and helped. We were completely unpacked. We were settled. And then I just suddenly had this space for all the feeling of it, and it was really crushing. Because it was like I had lost my life in the life we had been building for 10 years was gone. We left it, and I lost my husband, my person. And so probably for 6 months, if not, it was a couple of years, but 6 months that it was really, really bad and dark. I still functioned. Because sometimes that happens. Like you don't get out of bed, but I was still able to, for the most part, get up. We would eat something. Kids went to school, but I just felt like the best description I had was when I was talking to someone, it felt like there had been a nuclear bomb. And I was this person just like sitting on the ground looking around at all the fallout. That was it.
No, that totally makes sense because I know so many people express like just being at the grocery store and being like, how can you guys live your lives
Mm,
like everything's fine and my world has just shattered to pieces?
mhm.
It's I think that nuclear bomb, picture just explains it so well. Like I'm dealing with all of this and it's almost like everything around me doesn't matter. Everything's gone. Like all the things that everything just nothing matters except for these very few things in my life. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true.
And like a nuclear bomb, it's impossible to clean it up and put it all back together, right? It's not like you build some milk and you can wash it, but everything's changed.
Yeah.
Everything's different, and what you put back together is never gonna look the same. And that's hard too, right? And
Mhm.
so maybe share a little bit about that as you try to, look at this, everything that's fallen apart and this mess. How
Yeah.
did you begin to start putting things back together?
Right? First, everyone who knew me was so patient while they're like,
Yeah.
"What's gonna happen with this girl?" So, for me, there were many ways out, but what comes to mind is we got the Ensign back in the day. Now what is it called? The church magazine. But one of the months, there was this picture, and I, like, ripped off the back cover because I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's me," and it's this picture of this burned forest, like, it's completely burned, and all that's there is this tiny little sprig of evergreen, like, poking up out of charred destruction, and I hung that on my closet, and it was just like this call, and underneath was the scripture. I don't actually remember what the scripture is, nor do I have the paper. I don't know where it is. But it was like a call to me of like, "Okay, let's believe that God can give beauty for ashes, I know that, I've read that, I told other people that, but, like, let's believe and see if that can happen. And so yeah, so the process, I think just even having that image was like, helped me believe that that process could occur. And then I think it happened through many different means. For me, that looked like intellectual. So I had to read stuff. I had to, and like read everything. That's how I understand. That's how I make sense. So for me, that was like scriptures. That was books on grief. That was other people's experiences. That was actual like academic literature, like what is bereavement, what is grief, what is, and that came from a little hospice pamphlet. Was like, if you got a disease, you would read about your disease. Well, you have grief, so learn about grief, and that was like, oh, duh, of course, of course. So that was huge for me. Movement became really important. At first I couldn't even walk. I'm by nature like an active person, but for many months I couldn't. But I had these two um, ministering sisters who just were really patient. We're like, hey, Jordan, what if we went on a walk, around the block someday? And then that turned into like, what if we walked down the street? And then and we lived right on a mountainside. And so then it became like, what if we walked along this trail and came back? And it was like, that became really sacred. And it's a thing, these two women and I, like, we still walk together. We call it hiking, but it's like walking on nature trails. That is like, and now we've like climbed mountains and all these things, but that was a big thing. Skiing became a thing for me. I like started skiing as a 37-year-old woman who never skied before. I took lessons and got in that. And then I think also finding kind of an outlet for my grief to help other people. That became huge because it felt like this is pointless. Like my suffering is just suffering. It's so stupid and it's so pointless. But I found if I could help other people because of what I had suffered, it was like, oh, this has some purpose. This has some meaning. So for me, I started becoming involved in hospice. I helped with some bereavement groups that they were running through our local hospital. I started volunteering, to visit people who were dying. I was able to present at some grief conferences. And then ultimately that's led to my pursuing a degree in psychology so that I can become a therapist and work with people who are grieving. So those are some of the things. That's what comes to mind.
You did a lot in feels like a short period of time from not wanting to get out of bed to being at the top of a mountain, going down on skis. You really took on a lot. On the spiritual side of things, you kind of mentioned to us one of your favorite scriptures became Isaiah 53.
Mhm.
And maybe I can read Isaiah 53, 3-5, and then
Yeah, please.
maybe you'd be willing to share some thoughts about it. So this is a scripture everybody will be familiar with. It says, "He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed." So what spoke to you in those verses?
Yeah, I think and I think I'm grateful to like come here because for me the ultimate healer has been Jesus Christ. Like that's the way through. That's the only way through. And that scripture, interestingly, is what I chose as a 21-year-old to put on my missionary plaque when I knew less about suffering and grief and pain, but it became such a foundational principle for me, because what was important is knowing that Jesus knew this level of despair, this level of brokenness, this degree of heartache, and then letting him companion with me through it. I really felt that there wasn't a way over it or past it or under it or skip it. It was like, will I let him just walk me through it? And that happened, through in many ways. I think that happened through reading the scriptures. That happened. I went to the temple every week and I did sealings every time. And it was me and elderly people in the middle of the day. I love now that there's like young adults in the middle of the day, but in the late 2010s, it was just old people. And so that, like hearing those promises, I needed to hear it. I needed to know that would be the ultimate reality. And then I think reading things and understanding more about what Christ suffered, because I think in my growing up life, and even as a missionary, I understood and taught, oh, Christ suffered, but he resurrected and it's all good and there's a plan of salvation and there's degrees of glory. You just skip that part. But I think that became my way through, is really learning what his suffering, to some little small degree, the degree I knew and was experiencing, what that entailed.
Mm. Yeah, he knows, right? He knows what we're going through. He's acquainted and understands. And I think that's David mentioned that you wrote a book, and it's kind of that idea of how acquainted he is with the things that we go through. Would you mind sharing just that process of writing that book, and why you wrote it, and what it means to you?
Yeah. I had, in preparation to go back to school for my PhD, I had done some research with a professor who studies children's literature. And one of the topics she wanted to look at was children's books on death and grief, picture books. And so I was like, please let me. And so for about a year and a half, we just started amassing every children's book on death that we could find. Ended up with about 190. And we had a really big list of things. I read each one and was looking for certain things: who died, what happened, what were the beliefs about afterlife, did they have any rituals, memory keeping. You're looking through these books, and it occurred to me, a good way into the project, that none of these books talked about Jesus, and not one explained how he understands what you go through when you lose someone who dies. And so that was on my mind. It was on my mind for many weeks. And there was one night where I was writing in my journal. I'm a journaler, and I was writing in my journal, and really the first 2 lines of the book came to me from the Holy Ghost. And they were, when your daddy died, you felt sad. Jesus felt sad too. When your daddy died, you cried. Jesus cried too. And the words, were modified as we moved along to make it broader, to make it more applicable to people who'd lost, not their daddy, but other people. But I think that thought was given through revelation, because it's important for people to know, but for children to know, that Jesus knows this suffering and that you're not suffering it alone.
We will be sure to link out to that book, because I've got the version of it here with me. I keep it close by on
The
my bookshelf
illustrator
behind
was
me.
so good. That's not me.
but the words.
I think that was really important in that was not just to say those words, but to link it doctrinally. I felt that very strongly, that these aren't concepts we're just putting in the ether, like this is a good idea, but like to show every scripture, every statement about
Yeah.
Jesus has an accompanying scripture to teach that, like, this is doctrine. This is what we can rely on.
And
Yeah, I
I've
love.
read it to my children a couple of times now, and that's one of my favorite parts too, is to read the words that you wrote and then connect it to the scriptures that are right there on the page.
Yeah.
It's powerful and meaningful and needed. And so thank you. Thanks for the blessing that's been. And I'm so glad you wrote it, because that's how we got connected,
Yeah.
and had the opportunity to learn from you today. It's been so good.
Now, Jordan, before we get to our last question, we had decided we would talk a little bit about your first Christmas after Jake passed away, because Kori gave a beautiful message at the beginning, and it's it is the feel good, hopeful message that Jesus Christ brings to us, and we have to somehow get that message and our reality connected together. But many people who are listening to this podcast, the reality today is, I'm struggling, and it's Christmas is happening in 2 days, maybe from now, and I'm at my wit's end. And so could you just, for a couple of minutes, talk about Christmas and your experience with that, the first one or the first couple, and then we'll move to our last question.
Yeah, for sure. I think that first season, my realization was like, whoa, the Christmas season is not just a day of pain or several days or even a week. It is a season of pain because of all the things associated with the Christmas celebration. You know, it's not just one day where it's like, oh, it's Jake's birthday, or oh, it's, this surgery day or whatever, but it's like, it's day after day of things that you do that are happy, that are joyful, that suddenly are none of that. They're just painful. They're excruciating. They're reminders of like what isn't and what can't be anymore on earth. And so that was it for me for first, second, into the third year. My favorite day was January 2nd, when all of it was over. It was just heavy. And that's not Christmas, the day celebrating that Jesus Christ was born. That's like everything periphery to that.
Right. We still love that part.
Yes. Love that part. But I think, again, we've made it, that's not the focus of the 36 days from Thanksgiving to Christmas. And now the Christmas stuff, you start putting it up in November 1st, some people.
For me, I never took my Christmas tree down. So.
Yeah, also. So yeah, it just became a really painful thing. It was, and I think that's part of the affliction, is like things that were once so joyful, that you once so looked forward to, that you anticipated, then had this effect of like being daggers, and we're just another thing. Oh, I didn't realize that would, oh no, another way he's not here, or that we're alone, or that, this is heartache. So yeah, so I feel for that. I have a friend who texted me today, and she's a widow of like, I think 2 years, maybe 3. And she's like, what's happening? I thought I was through this. I thought I could do this again. She said, I feel like I'm swimming upstream in mud. And I just tried to tell her that's normal.
Yep.
Yeah.
We found the second set of anniversaries was harder than the first one, because we anticipated it being very hard the first time. And we did not anticipate it as being as bad the second time. And so in a lot of ways, we'd say the second Christmas without Ava was harder than the first Christmas without Ava. And I know everybody experiences things differently. But
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jordan. This has been incredible, and we've learned so much and felt so many powerful things from what you've shared with us. I know there was a song, so I don't know if you'll incorporate this in your last answer to our last question, but we'd love to hear about that as well. But we'll go ahead and ask that last question, and that is, considering your experience with grief, what do you now believe about Jesus Christ?
Yeah. So that's how I'll end, is just with those lyrics. So one of the things that also got me through Jake's illness and then afterwards was the oratorio Lamb of God by Rob Gardner. And it's a musical kind of scriptural compilation of stories about the experience of Jesus's life. And one song that I played, to the extent that my kids are like, "Oh no, here's hope, not again." It's like ad nauseum, but it's called Here's Hope, and it's Mary, Jesus's mother, singing after he has died on the cross, after Gethsemane and the scourging and the crown of thorns and the nails. She sings this song, and I just will close with these words because this is what I know about him. And it says, "He who healed our sorrows here was bruised and broken. He whose love no end knows here was forsaken, left all alone. Here despair cries boldly, claiming this its victory. Sweeter peace enfolds me. Hope did not die here, but here was given. Here is hope." And so I think that's my message. I think for me, hope came from his suffering and from his death. That's where I knew that he could be seen, and that's where I found him as I was working through and living my husband's suffering and his death, and then my suffering and my children's suffering and grief, that he was with us because he had the same experience.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of your stories and your commentary, and especially the spirit that you have with you and what you've been able to share with everybody. We really appreciate all that you've been able to share with us today. So thank you so much for being on the Grief and Belief podcast.
Thank you both for what you do. There are not enough resources for grieving people, and I just feel grateful for every person who puts things out there to help those who are bereaved. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their story of hope. If you know someone who might be blessed by hearing this message, please share it with them. We would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review, and comment on our podcast so others can find it. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, as well as join our Grief and Belief Facebook group. Thank you to our sponsor, High Five Live Tours, where fun and joy meet on inspiring travel experiences. Special thanks to our producer, Misty Lynn Howard. Check out her history podcast called Faith Ignited. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.